Wealth is energy, attract it by becoming valuable. Written by Ronnie Rowland. Published by Growth Literacy Lounge. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. That truth lingers beneath every frustration, every exhausted attempt to build wealth through willpower. It waits behind the question you've asked in quiet moments: why does it feel like I'm doing everything right and still not receiving what I desire? Because money, in its essence, is not logical. It's energetic. It doesn't obey the rules of sweat and sacrifice, it obeys alignment. It flows not to the most deserving, but to the most resonant, and resonance is not something you chase, it's something you become. This book is not about strategies, it is about frequency. About the invisible field of belief, identity, and intention that shapes everything you touch. You will not find formulas here, or productivity hacks, or promises wrapped in urgency. You will find something quieter, something far more potent, the invitation to stop reaching and start realigning. Because the truth is, you were never lacking in effort. You were never deficient in discipline. What you lacked was recognition, the deep inner knowing that your value was never external. It was never something you had to earn. It is something you transmit. And the clearer that transmission becomes, the more life organizes itself around it. This is not theory, it's physics of the unseen. A reintroduction to the current that lives beneath your actions, the energy that either invites or repels what you seek. When that energy is grounded in self-trust, in purpose, in stillness, you don't chase money. Money comes looking for you. You'll discover, as the chapters unfold, that your wealth was never somewhere else. It was waiting inside the identity you were too busy proving to remember. And when you return to that center, calm, magnetic, unshaken, you realize you never needed to perform value, you only needed to embody it. So this is not a journey of doing more, it is a journey of becoming clear. Let each word be a mirror. Let each idea be a tuning fork. Let this be the moment you stop striving to be valuable and start living as if you already are. Because once you believe that, everything begins to move. Chapter 1. The Invisible Wall of Exhaustion. There is a tiredness that does not come from labor. It comes from misalignment. From the quiet ache of giving everything and receiving so little in return. Many who seek wealth wake each day with a list, a plan, a mission to conquer, believing that effort is the bridge to abundance. And yet, as the days stretch long and the nights fill with restless calculation, something feels off. The results don't reflect the sacrifice, the bank account lags behind the calendar. The deeper question arises in moments of silence: why isn't it working? This exhaustion isn't physical, it is energetic. It is the fatigue of running towards something that seems always a few steps ahead. And beneath it lies an invisible wall, a belief passed down through generations, whispered in classrooms, repeated in boardrooms: you must suffer to succeed. You must prove your worth through grind, demonstrate your value through output, earn your right to receive through depletion. This belief is so woven into our understanding of money that most never question it. They simply run harder, convinced that speed will shatter the wall. But energy doesn't respond to exhaustion. It responds to frequency, and frequency cannot be faked. The truth that hides behind the veil of busyness is this: money does not reward effort alone, it mirrors identity. It flows where there is clarity, not just where there is motion. When you believe that value exists outside you, you will chase endlessly. But when you see that your internal state is your value, the chase dissolves, wealth begins to seek you. The invisible wall, then, is not made of circumstance. It is made of confusion. It is built from the idea that value must be proven rather than embodied. And in trying to prove, we abandon the very energy that makes us magnetic. We become echoes of others' expectations rather than signals of our own truth. We trade presence for pressure, intuition for instruction, and alignment for achievement. You may have felt this. The moment you close a deal or complete a project, and instead of satisfaction, there is emptiness. A brief high followed by a deeper low. That is the body's way of signaling misalignment. That is the soul saying, you are not exhausted from the work, but from being someone you are not. When a river flows freely, it does not tire. It moves with purpose, directed by gravity and shape. It does not push, it follows. And yet it carves valleys, feeds lands, creates life. You, too, were meant to flow. But the conditioning of hustle turned you into a dammed current, straining against yourself. The result is friction. And friction, over time, wears even the strongest spirit thin. There is a reason why some people seem to attract wealth with ease. It is not because they work harder. It is because they carry a different energy, they walk in alignment with their worth. And the world responds. They are not chasing, they are becoming. They are not asking how to get, they are asking how to be. To move past the wall of exhaustion, you must first see it, not as failure, but as feedback. Not as weakness, but as wisdom. It is the body's request for a new relationship with effort, one where energy is respected, not exploited, where value is owned, not negotiated, where money is not chased, but invited. The world does not need more tired achievers. It needs more aligned creators, the kind of person whose very presence reminds others what is possible when you no longer perform value but become it. The journey ahead begins not with more action, but with a quieter question: who am I when I no longer need to prove my worth? Chapter 2: The Illusion of Hustle. There is a myth wrapped in urgency that whispers through the modern world, that if you just work harder, longer, louder, success will eventually kneel at your feet. Hustle, we are told, is holy. Sleep when you're dead. Outwork the competition. Prove you want it more. And so people rise before dawn. Notebooks filled with tasks, screens glowing through the night, calendars crammed with effort. But beneath this performance of productivity lies a quiet panic. What if all this movement is just noise? Hustle promises control. It gives the illusion that if you do enough, the outcome is guaranteed. Yet life is not a machine with predictable outputs. It is a field of energy that responds to resonance. You can plant seeds all day, but if you plant them in frozen soil, nothing will grow. Activity without alignment is wasted motion. You may be moving, yes, but are you actually progressing? The illusion of hustle is seductive because it masks fear with effort. If you're always busy, you don't have to sit with the discomfort of not knowing. If you're constantly doing, you never have to question whether what you're doing is right. It feels safer to be in motion than to pause and reflect, but safety is not the same as truth. Our truth often speaks in stillness. Real value is never loud. It does not need to advertise itself. It simply is. Think of the sun, it rises without announcement, and yet all life turns toward it. The same is true of those who are aligned. They do not hustle. They radiate. Their energy speaks before they enter the room. Their clarity replaces their chase. Hustle tells you that your value must be earned again every day. But alignment knows your value is intrinsic, waiting only to be remembered. When you believe that busyness equals importance, you sacrifice presence for performance. You move from task to task hoping one will finally unlock the door. But the door was never locked. You were simply knocking on the wrong house. You can hustle your way to temporary wins. You might hit numbers, close deals, fill your calendar. But success without alignment is just a shinier version of struggle. You'll arrive at your goals only to find they demand even more of you. The bar moves. The hunger remains. And the life you were chasing begins to feel like a life sentence. True wealth begins when you leave behind the need to prove. When you choose strategy over speed. Intention over impulse. Stillness over scrambling. This is not laziness, it is precision. Like an archer who waits for the perfect moment, you act not from panic, but from presence. Each movement purposeful. Each decision aligned. This shift does not mean doing less. It means doing with awareness. Energy becomes your currency. You invest it where it multiplies rather than leaks. You notice what drains you and release it. You recognize what energizes you and expand it. The result is not just more income, it's more peace, more clarity, more fulfillment. The illusion of hustle dissolves when you realize that success is not about how much you do, but about how true you are while doing it. When you move from authenticity, you move with power. Not the power of force, but the power of resonance, the kind that draws in opportunities because your frequency says yes before your words do. You were not born to chase. You were born to attract, but attraction requires presence. And presence cannot coexist with panic. Let this be the moment you begin to question the story of hustle. Not because you are weak, but because you are wise enough to know that when energy aligns with purpose, everything moves, not from pressure, but from flow. Chapter 3: Money as a Mirror of Identity. We tend to think of money as something out there, something we go out to get, earn, win, or secure, a prize for effort, a reward for performance. But money is not merely a reward, it is a reflection, a mirror that reveals the invisible story we carry about ourselves. And like all mirrors, it does not lie. It shows us not what we wish were true, but what we truly believe about value, worth, and receiving. What if your income is not determined by how much you work, but by how deeply you see yourself? What if every dollar you attract is simply an echo of your inner state, your identity made visible in material form? This idea is not mystical. It is energetic. The world responds to who you are being, not just what you are doing. Actions matter, but they are downstream of belief. If you believe you are barely enough, your efforts will carry the scent of scarcity. If you believe you are inherently valuable, your presence becomes magnetic, regardless of output. Identity shapes everything. It is the soil from which action grows. Two people can take the same step, speak the same words, make the same call, launch the same offer, and yet receive vastly different outcomes. Why? Because the energy behind the action speaks louder than the action itself. One acts from fear, the other from clarity. One reaches, the other radiates. One hopes to be chosen, the other knows they are already whole. Most people don't have an earning problem. They have an identity problem. They've built their lives around proving, pleasing, and performing, hoping the world will finally reward them for their sacrifice. But the world isn't looking for sacrifice. It's looking for resonance, and resonance begins with truth. Who are you when nothing needs to be earned? What do you believe you deserve simply because you exist? You may notice that when you feel confident, purposeful, and connected to your worth, things seem to unfold more easily. The right clients appear. The conversation flows, the opportunity lands. Not because you did more, but because you were more aligned. Your identity vibrated at a frequency that matched the result. The mirror reflected back what was always within. On the other hand, when you operate from fear, self-doubt, or unworthiness, money often feels blocked. You send the emails, attend the meetings, follow the scripts, and yet nothing lands. The mirror reflects hesitation, lack, and confusion. The signal is scrambled. No matter how hard you try, the energy doesn't transmit cleanly. This is not a call to fake confidence or wear the mask of abundance. It's an invitation to become honest, or to examine the identity you've inherited, and decide whether it still serves your vision. To ask with gentle courage, is the person I am being aligned with the wealth I say I want? Or am I trying to outrun the parts of me I haven't yet accepted? Transformation begins with awareness. When you see money not as something separate, but as a mirror, you begin to focus inward. Not out of guilt, but out of empowerment. You realize that you are not chasing value, you are discovering it within yourself. And the more you align with this truth, the more the outer world reorganizes to match your inner clarity. Money is not just a transaction. It is a reflection, a feedback loop. A signal from the world saying, this is how clearly we see you, because this is how clearly you see yourself. Change the image in the mirror, not by adjusting the reflection, but by becoming someone who no longer doubts their worth. Then watch what shifts, without force. Watch what flows, without chase. Chapter 4: Frequency is the New Currency. There is a language older than words, more precise than logic, more honest than appearances. It is the language of energy. Long before a person speaks, they transmit. Before a decision is made, there is a frequency that informs it. And wealth, though clothed in numbers and contracts, responds to this unseen dialogue. It does not follow effort blindly, it follows energy faithfully. Frequency is the new currency. Every thought you think, every belief you hold, every emotion you entertain emits a signal. That signal becomes your offering to the world. It's not a performance, but a broadcast, and the world is always listening. Clients, partners, opportunities, they are not just responding to your strategy, they are responding to your state. They sense whether you trust yourself or doubt, whether you are expanding or contracting, whether you are here to contribute or to compensate for inner lack. High-frequency energy is not loud, it is not busy, it is not scattered. It is quiet confidence, grounded presence, clear intention. It does not chase because it does not need. It attracts by being whole. When you live in this frequency, you find that life begins to respond in kind. The right people find you. The right doors open, or the timing aligns. It feels like magic, but it is simply resonance. Low-frequency energy, on the other hand, sends out confusion. It says, I need, I hope, I'm not enough. It cloaks itself in effort and tries to mask the noise with action. But no amount of doing can override the frequency of lack. Even if you manage to gather wealth from this place, it will feel fragile, difficult to sustain. It is built on shaky ground. You cannot fake frequency. The universe is not fooled by language or posture. It tunes into vibration, not volume. So the real work is not to try harder but to tune higher, to refine your inner world until it hums with clarity, integrity, and value. To stop asking, how do I get more? And begin asking, what am I broadcasting? This shift requires presence. It asks that you become aware of your default emotional tone. Are you living in urgency or trust? Are you choosing from fear or from alignment? Are you reacting or responding? These subtle distinctions create massive differences in energetic signature. And over time they shape everything, from your income to your influence to your sense of peace. Think of yourself as a lighthouse. Your job is not to chase ships, but to shine steadily. The brighter and clearer your beam, the more those aligned with your signal will find you. You don't need to convince. You only need to radiate. This is what it means to become magnetic. Not to pull through force, but to attract through frequency. The mind may resist this idea. It wants steps, systems, guarantees, but energy doesn't move in straight lines. It moves in waves. You must feel your way into alignment. You must learn the art of inner listening. You must let your state become your strategy. When you begin to understand that your frequency is your true offer, you no longer feel the need to perform. You return to your center. You speak from truth. You move from peace. And paradoxically, this is when the world starts to respond with more flow, more connection, more wealth. Because wealth is not impressed by exhaustion. It is drawn to alignment. And alignment is the byproduct of frequency. Not the frequency you pretend to have, but the one you choose to live. So if money is a mirror and identity is the message, then frequency is the signal that delivers it. Tune yourself, and you tune your reality. Chapter 5. Releasing the Struggle Script. There is a script playing quietly beneath the surface of most lives. It is old, inherited, and invisible. It says that struggle is noble, that suffering earns reward, that only through pain do we become worthy of abundance. This script is not questioned because it feels like the truth. It is etched into the culture, passed down through families, reinforced by systems that benefit from fatigue. But like all scripts, it can be rewritten, and the first step is noticing you're in one. The struggle script whispers, keep pushing. Even when your body pleads for rest, even when your spirit grows quiet, it insists on one more task, one more sacrifice, one more display of commitment. It confuses effort with love. It teaches that proving your worth is the price of receiving. And so, like actors on a stage, we perform pain, hoping applause will follow. But wealth does not reward suffering. It rewards alignment. Struggle is not a signal of value, it is often a symptom of disconnection. Disconnection from ease, from trust, from the idea that you are already enough. When you believe that only hardship leads to success, you build a relationship with money that is strained and conditional. You do not allow it to flow, you demand that it justify your exhaustion. Letting go of the struggle script is not giving up. It is waking up. It is recognizing that the path to more does not require less of you, it requires more of the real you. The you that trusts ease. The you that listens inward. The you that knows value doesn't come from pain, but from presence. This shift is subtle. It happens in quiet choices, in saying no to the unnecessary, in refusing to glorify burnout, in choosing wholeness over hustle. Releasing struggle means rethinking where you place your energy. It means asking, does this choice align with who I'm becoming? Rather than, will this prove that I'm enough? It is no longer about earning rest, it is about living from rest, not an activity, but a rested state of being, a calm foundation from which inspired action flows. Many fear that without struggle, they will lose their edge. That ease is laziness. That effortlessness is weakness, but this is the echo of the old script. In truth, ease is a higher intelligence. It does not mean avoiding challenge, it means meeting challenge from clarity. It does not mean doing nothing, it means doing what matters most, with full presence. Letting go also means grieving the identity you built around being the struggler, the one who worked harder than everyone else, the one who earned every penny, the one who carried the weight so others didn't have to. There is pride in that story, and rightfully so. But you do not need to abandon your strength to release your struggle. You are not weaker for choosing ease, you are wiser for recognizing its power. This is the paradox: when you stop struggling, things begin to flow. Not because the world changes, but because your energy becomes more available, more open, more receptive. You move from tension to trust, from forcing to allowing. And in that space, wealth finds you, not as a reward, but as a response. The script can be rewritten, not in one dramatic act, but in small, consistent choices, in the quiet refusal to glorify pain, in the gentle insistence that your value does not depend on depletion, in the daily return to alignment. Because the truth is simple, and it has been waiting patiently for your attention, you do not need to struggle to be worthy. You only need to be willing to stop. Chapter 6: Becoming a Signal, Not a Seeker. There comes a point on the path to abundance when you stop reaching outward and start radiating inward. It is not marked by grand announcements or sudden windfalls, but by a shift so subtle it almost goes unnoticed. You no longer ask, "How do I get?" and begin asking, "Who am I becoming?" In that question lies the real transformation. For wealth is not the product of constant seeking. It is the natural response to a powerful signal. To seek is to believe that something essential is missing. It is to stand outside yourself, searching, waiting, grasping. The seeker lives in a posture of need, often unaware that their very reaching sends a signal of lack. And the world, like a finely tuned receiver, responds accordingly. Opportunities may approach, but they hesitate. Resources may appear, but they waver. There is static in the signal, too much trying, not enough being. The shift begins when you realize that your most valuable work is not to seek, but to become. To shape your energy, your clarity, your identity into a frequency that speaks for you. When you become a signal, you no longer need to convince others of your value. You become the kind of person whose very presence does the talking. Not because you say more, but because you need to say less. The energy is enough. Think of a tuning fork. When struck, it emits a clear tone. Any object vibrating at the same frequency begins to resonate. This is not force. It is resonance, and this is how true wealth is drawn, not through persuasive tactics, but through the silent language of alignment. When your energy is coherent, others feel it. When your vision is clear, others trust it. When your value is embodied, others recognize it without explanation. To become a signal, you must first know what you're broadcasting. Are you communicating trust or doubt, clarity or confusion, power or hesitation? The answer lies not in your words, but in your being, in how you enter a room, in the pause between your thoughts, in the way you hold space for possibility, even when results haven't yet arrived. This shift from seeker to signal does not mean abandoning action, it means anchoring action in identity. The seeker acts from hope, the signal acts from knowing. The seeker moves to find worth, the signal moves because they are already whole. This difference changes everything. It removes desperation from your decisions and replaces it with quiet authority. When you live as a signal, rejection loses its sting, delay no longer feels like denial. You trust that what matches your frequency will find you. You stop chasing alignment and start becoming it, and as your energy settles into truth, the world organizes itself around your clarity. People respond not to your tactics, but to your tone, the unspoken confidence that says, "I am already enough." There is power in this way of living. It is not loud, but it is undeniable. It moves like gravity, unseen, yet irresistible, and it frees you from the exhausting loop of external validation. Because when you are the signal, you no longer need to be seen to be certain. You know what you carry. You know what you offer. And you trust that the right doors will recognize your knock. This is not magic. It is mastery. The mastery of self, and of energy, of identity. And it begins the moment you stop trying to get and begin deciding to be. Because what you are being is already sending a message. Make sure it's one the world wants to echo. Chapter 7. Subtle Movements, Massive Shifts. Not all change roars. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it arrives without fanfare, without thunder, without the visible markers the world calls progress. Yet it is precisely in these quiet spaces that the deepest shifts take root. A subtle decision made in solitude, a moment of clarity before the world wakes, a single thought allowed to linger. These are the movements that alter everything. Not because they are loud, but because they are true. We've been taught to associate transformation with grand gestures, drastic leaps, bold declarations, but the most enduring changes often begin in stillness. Not with the noise of external momentum, but with the realignment of inner rhythm. When your actions begin to flow from this deeper place, they may appear small, even insignificant to others. But to you, they are sacred. They mark the transition from reaction to intention, from urgency to alignment. Subtlety does not mean weakness. It means precision. It means releasing the habit of performing value and choosing instead to embody it quietly. Like a tree growing underground before it ever breaks the surface, your inner shift precedes visible success. And when you act from this space, you no longer need immediate validation. You begin to trust the unseen. You start to understand that results follow resonance, not volume. Each day becomes a canvas for micro-decisions. Not the kind that crowd your to-do list, but the kind that recalibrate your frequency. Choosing to pause before replying. Choosing to create before consuming. Choosing to align before executing. These small pivots compound, not just in outcome, but in identity. They form a new rhythm. One that honors your energy rather than drains it. When you live this way, you begin to notice that the things you used to force now find their way to you. Not because you stopped acting, but because you started acting from alignment. The world responds not just to movement, but to the meaning behind the movement. It listens not just to what you do, but to the energy you carry as you do it. This is where power lives, not in the performance of success, but in the quiet, consistent return to alignment. You stop asking, "What more can I do?" and start asking, "What would it look like to move from clarity?" That question dismantles the chase. It slows the spinning. It brings you back to the only place wealth ever truly arrives, the now. Subtle movements also teach patience. They remind you that depth takes time, that becoming is not an event, but a process. When you honor the slow growth, you detach from the metrics of urgency. You no longer need every day to deliver proof of progress. You understand that some of the most significant shifts are invisible at first, felt only in the lightness of your breath, the calm in your chest, the soft certainty that you are no longer performing a life, but living one. Massive shifts, then, are often internal. They may not earn applause, but they change your trajectory. A new thought accepted. A fear released. A boundary honored. These are not the stories people tell at parties, but they are the ones that shape destinies. Because from this place of quiet certainty, new actions emerge, bolder, cleaner, more potent. Not because you tried harder, but because you became clearer. So do not underestimate the quiet. Do not dismiss the small. Do not wait for dramatic moments to signify that change is here. It may have already begun, in a breath, in a choice, in a whisper. You finally decided to trust. The shift is real, even if no one else can see it yet, and its impact will echo further than noise ever could. Chapter 8. Flow over force. There is a moment when discipline stops feeling like discipline, when what once required willpower begins to move on its own, when habits you had to build become habits that build you. In that moment, you have entered flow. Not a state of laziness, not an escape from effort, but a refined version of commitment, where energy aligns with direction and action arises naturally. This is the evolution of discipline, from force into flow. Force is the old language of effort. It relies on pressure, on shoulds, on external motivation. It pushes against resistance, hoping to wear it down. It demands consistency, even if that consistency costs clarity. And while it may produce results, they often come with fatigue. The body achieves, but the spirit contracts. You move forward, but not always toward yourself. Flow, on the other hand, honors timing. It listens before it acts. It allows rhythm to guide structure, not the other way around. It is discipline without tension, commitment without coercion. In flow, you are still devoted, but your devotion feels like expression, not obligation. You wake up not with a weight to carry, but with a pulse to follow. The difference is not in how much you do, but in how deeply you align with what you do. Force asks, "What must I accomplish?" Flow asks, "What wants to move through me today?" The first seeks control, the second trusts coherence, and in that trust, a different kind of productivity is born, one that feels less like labor and more like living. This does not mean abandoning discipline. It means refining its source. True discipline isn't about denying desire, it's about channeling it. It is the art of directing energy without distorting it. In this way, discipline becomes a form of listening. You begin to notice what tasks bring you alive, what routines sharpen your focus, what boundaries preserve your energy. And instead of forcing yourself to obey a schedule, you sculpt a life that supports your natural rhythm. Flow arises when you stop battling yourself. When you no longer see resistance as an enemy to conquer, but as a signal to interpret. Sometimes resistance means fear, other times, it means misalignment. The wisdom lies in knowing the difference. And this wisdom grows when you make space to feel, to reflect, to hear the quiet truth beneath the noise of urgency. In flow, discipline becomes invisible. It's no longer something you have to do, it becomes who you are. You no longer chase consistency, you embody it. You don't need to summon motivation each morning, because your actions are connected to meaning, and meaning carries its own momentum. The paradox is that this way of living often produces more, not just in quantity, but in quality, because you are not scattering your energy, you are focusing it. You are not hustling from lack, you are moving from fullness. Your results come not from pushing harder, but from removing what doesn't belong, and what remains is powerful because it is pure. There is grace in this shift, a quiet elegance that replaces the grind with groundedness. You no longer need to be the enforcer of your goals, you become their embodiment. And in doing so, you turn work into practice, movement into meditation, discipline into devotion. So let go of the myth that only the hard path is worthy. There is another way. A way where effort meets ease, where structure serves spirit, where action flows not from force, but from the steady current of alignment. That current is always available. It begins not with striving, but with listening, not with pressure, but with presence. When you move from this place, you no longer have to fight for results. You become the kind of person for whom results naturally flow. Chapter 9: The Wealth of Patience. Patience is not pause. It is presence. It is not the act of waiting, but the art of trusting. In a world addicted to immediacy, to progress that can be measured and posted, patience appears weak, a lack of drive, a failure to act. But true patience is not passive. It is powerful. It is the ability to hold your frequency steady while the world catches up to your alignment. It is the wealth of stillness, multiplied over time. When you begin to live from inner value rather than outer validation, there will be moments when nothing seems to happen. The old rewards tied to hustle and urgency may fall silent, the frantic applause of busyness may fade, and in that quiet, a deeper invitation emerges. Will you trust the process even when the proof is absent? Most people do not struggle with failure. They struggle with the space between effort and evidence. They fear the gap between seed and sprout. But everything real grows in delay. The roots form long before the branches appear. The inner structure matures before the outer results can reflect it. Patience is what allows you to remain rooted while the surface still looks unchanged. Without patience, alignment fractures. You may begin with clarity, with pure intention, with high-frequency energy, but if results do not arrive quickly, the doubt creeps in. You return to old patterns, old urgency, old force. You start adjusting your signal to match the timeline, rather than letting the timeline respond to your signal. And just like that, the magnetism breaks. But when you practice patience, you preserve your power. You become the kind of person who does not panic in silence, who does not abandon trust in transition. This is not stubbornness, it is strength. The strength to know that just because something hasn't arrived, doesn't mean it isn't on the way. The strength to know that energetic alignment is enough to set things in motion, even before they're visible. Patience is not the absence of action, it is aligned action taken without anxiety. It is movement grounded in timing, not intention. When you trust timing, you no longer chase opportunity, you prepare for it, you refine yourself, you sharpen your craft. You become the version of yourself who is ready, not just willing. Because readiness is not about having everything figured out, it's about having the energy that can hold what you desire when it arrives. This inner steadiness becomes its own kind of wealth. It frees you from the emotional roller coaster of results. You no longer depend on instant wins to feel worthy. Your identity is no longer negotiated by metrics. You are not performing progress, you are embodying truth, and the truth always unfolds, even if it unfolds slowly. Think of nature. The tides do not rush. The seasons do not sprint. The moon does not question its glow just because the sky is cloudy. Everything in nature trusts its cycle, and you, too, are part of that intelligence. The more you align with your natural rhythm, the more wealth becomes an extension of your state. Not something to be summoned, but something to be sustained. Patience rewires your relationship with time. It shifts you from racing toward outcomes to realizing that every moment carries its own value. It teaches you to live in process, not just in pursuit. And from that space, you begin to attract not just success, but a success that fits, that feels right, not rushed. This is the wealth of patience. The calm, quiet power of those who trust what they're becoming more than what they're achieving, who hold the frequency, even when the world isn't looking, who understand that time is not an enemy, but an ally, a silent architect building something extraordinary beneath the surface of the ordinary. Chapter 10. Expanding without being seen. There are phases of life where everything grows, yet nothing shows. You wake with more clarity, you choose with more integrity, you feel less reactive, more anchored, and yet, from the outside, nothing has changed. No new milestones, no external praise, no evidence of expansion. But make no mistake, you are evolving, quietly, invisibly, profoundly. We are conditioned to measure progress by what can be witnessed: promotions, numbers, accolades, growth charts. But some of the most significant transformations are subtle. They do not arrive with ceremony. They do not leave a trail of applause. They are shifts in how you hold yourself, in how you respond to uncertainty, in how you no longer abandon your truth for temporary approval. This invisible growth is not lesser than visible achievement. It is the foundation of it. Without the inner restructuring, external success collapses under its own weight. It's easy to build a tower. Harder to become the kind of person who can live at its height without losing balance. Inner expansion makes room for outer wealth, and this expansion often occurs in solitude, silence, and stillness. You may feel like nothing is happening, but that's because the changes are happening within. Your thoughts are becoming more focused, your boundaries more intact, your energy less scattered. These are not small things. They are the infrastructure of a different life. One that does not need to be louder, only truer. In this space, your value deepens, not through performance, but through presence. You stop seeking validation and start radiating coherence. You no longer rush to fill the silence, you learn to trust it. You learn that just because no one sees your becoming doesn't mean it isn't happening. It means it's happening in the most authentic way possible, without needing an audience. Expansion without visibility requires faith. Faith in the process. Faith in your energy. Faith that who you are becoming matters more than who is watching. This is a different kind of courage. The courage to keep showing up without constant feedback. The courage to keep aligning without immediate reward. The courage to believe in what hasn't bloomed yet. Think of the forest in winter. Nothing appears to move. The trees are bare. The ground is still. But beneath the soil, life is gathering. Roots are stretching. Systems are strengthening. The forest is not dormant. It is preparing. And when the season turns, the growth will be undeniable. Not because it began then, but because it began long before, unseen. You are allowed to be in a season like this. A season of preparation. A season of invisible growth. It does not mean you are behind. It means you are building something real. Something that will last. Something not shaken by trends or timelines. Your energy is shifting into alignment with a future that may not yet be visible, but is already forming. There is a sacredness to this kind of growth. A quiet authority. You begin to walk differently, not because of new accolades, but because of new understanding. You begin to speak less to convince and more to connect. You begin to act not from pressure, but from peace. These are the marks of transformation, not always loud, but always lasting. So do not rush the season. Do not judge the silence. Do not measure your worth by what the world sees. The most important shifts often occur in the dark, in the background, in the breath. And when they complete, they do not need introduction. They are felt. They are known. They are lived. You are expanding, not to be seen, but to be sovereign, not to impress, but to embody. This is the kind of wealth that does not fade, because it was never dependent on anything outside you. It grew from the ground of your own becoming. Chapter 11. Presence over pressure. In a world obsessed with speed, presence is a quiet rebellion. It is the refusal to be rushed, the decision to be fully here, even when everything urges you to be somewhere else. It is not a denial of ambition, but a redefinition of pace. Because when you choose presence, you reclaim your power, not through urgency, but through attention. Pressure is seductive. It masquerades as motivation. It whispers that faster is better, that stillness is laziness, that value comes only from relentless forward motion. And so many live breathless lives, chasing deadlines that never end, trading depth for efficiency, always reaching but never arriving. But what if the real wealth lives not in what you achieve, but in how fully you live each moment on the way there? Presence is not passivity. It is the most active form of awareness. It sharpens your perception. It refines your choices. It connects you with the intelligence of timing. When you are present, you notice the difference between movement and momentum. You stop acting out of fear and start choosing from clarity. You no longer perform value, you live it. The illusion of pressure is that it keeps you productive, but it often keeps you reactive. You say yes too quickly. You chase results that don't fit. You confuse urgency with importance. Presence breaks that cycle. It pauses the automatic. It creates space for discernment, and in that space, wiser decisions emerge, actions that align with who you are, not who you're trying to impress. This shift is subtle, but profound. Instead of asking, "What do I need to do next?" you ask, "What needs my full attention now?" That question anchors you. It removes the fog of obligation. It reminds you that energy expands where focus goes, and when your focus is fractured by pressure, your power leaks. But when your focus is rooted in presence, your power grows. Presence also deepens connection. It turns conversations into communion. It transforms transactions into trust. In business, in relationships, in creativity, the one who is fully present becomes unforgettable. Not because they dominate the room, but because they inhabit it. Their energy speaks without urgency. Their calm becomes a kind of gravity. To live this way requires practice. It requires releasing the myth that if you're not pushing, you're falling behind. It requires trusting that rest does not mean regression. That reflection is not wasted time. That alignment is not a luxury, but a strategy. When you begin to value your attention as your greatest resource, you stop giving it away to pressure. You start investing it in presence. This doesn't mean you abandon goals. It means you pursue them with a different posture, one that says, "I will move forward, but I will not abandon myself in the process." One that recognizes the difference between pressure that collapses and presence that expands. Because presence is not stillness for its own sake, it is movement without distortion. It is progress without panic. And as you learn to anchor yourself in presence, you begin to notice something remarkable. Life starts to respond differently. Opportunities feel less forced. Conversations feel more aligned. Ideas flow with greater ease. Not because you're doing more, but because you're here, fully, unapologetically, wisely here. Pressure rushes past the moment in search of meaning. Presence finds meaning in the moment itself. And that, perhaps, is the deepest wealth of all. Not just to arrive somewhere impressive, but to be awake and alive for every step of the journey. Not just to achieve more, but to experience more of what you already have. In presence, the race ends. The noise quiets. The rhythm slows. And in that stillness you remember something the world forgot. You are already enough, and the moment you're in is already sacred. Everything you were chasing begins to move toward you, not because you forced it, but because you finally stopped running. Chapter 12. You are the value. In the end, the journey was never about money. It was about becoming. About remembering something the world made you forget, that your value was never earned, only embodied. That wealth is not a reward for proving yourself, but a response to being yourself. That every strategy, every shift, every insight along the way was leading you back to the same truth: you are the value. You were taught to look outward, to measure your worth by comparison, by validation, by achievement, to chase the symbols of success without questioning their meaning. But what if nothing outside you can define you? What if the true transformation is not in what you gain, but in what you finally allow yourself to be? When you live from this place, money becomes quiet. It no longer carries the noise of need. It is no longer charged with pressure or proof. It becomes a neutral energy, responding to your alignment. It comes not because you are grasping for it, but because you are living as someone it naturally flows toward. It becomes a mirror, not a master. You stop asking, "How do I earn more?" and start asking, "How can I more fully express who I already am?" That shift changes everything. It removes the layers of performance. It releases the constant measurement. It lets your life become the offering, your presence the invitation. You become magnetic not because you're trying to be, but because you've stopped trying to be anything else. Being the value doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing everything from truth. It means allowing your identity to lead your strategy, your energy to shape your execution, your essence to be the reason things work, not the afterthought. You move with clarity. You act with intention. You receive without resistance. This way of being is not louder, it's cleaner. It doesn't seek attention, it radiates coherence. You walk into a room differently, not because you say more, but because you carry less contradiction. The energy is aligned. The frequency is steady. The signal is unmistakable. And others feel it, even if they can't explain it. True wealth is the byproduct of self-ownership, not the inflated kind born of ego, but the grounded kind born of presence. The kind that says, "I know who I am, and I no longer need the world to confirm it." That clarity makes you powerful. Not because it dominates, but because it liberates. You no longer need to perform value. You simply live it. And when you live it, the world adjusts. Clients respond differently. Ideas find you. Timing aligns. Not as a reward, but as a resonance. Your outer life begins to match your inner truth. Not always immediately, not always predictably, but always inevitably. Because energy does not lie. And when your energy is clear, your life cannot help but reflect it. So now, the question is no longer about how to attract wealth. The question is, are you willing to live as the person who naturally attracts it? Are you willing to stop chasing and start becoming? Are you willing to trust that the version of you who no longer doubts your worth is already ready? You are not here to convince the world of your value. You are here to embody it so clearly that the world has no choice but to respond. To walk as if you are enough. To create as if your voice matters. Is to serve not from sacrifice, but from sovereignty. You are the source. You are the signal. You are the value. And now, you are free. Take care and be well.